On today's show, what are the most interesting stories going into the NBA offseason? Mine is, the heck are the Phoenix Suns going to do? We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome. You are locked on to the NBA. My name is Nick Angstadt, host of the Locked On Mavericks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On NBA your first listen today, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform. Give us a 5-star review, like the video on YouTube, comment anything below. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And joining me, I would say as always, but not. But not as always.
Almost
Pat
never.
Pat is MIA. I can't find Pat. Pat went to the Cubs game at noon today. We haven't found out. I honestly, I actually hope he's okay. I've not heard from him. I'm gonna guess he did the 9-9, like the 9x9 challenge. He went nine dogs, 9 beers, nine innings, and then he just passed out. That's my guess. But joining me from Locked On Thunder, what you got for me, Rylan Stiles?
Very excited to be here. Very excited to kick off the offseason, and lots of thoughts with Cubs fan Pat the designer.
Today, we're going to talk about our most interesting stories going into the offseason. So we each picked 2 teams that we think are the most interesting to us, and we'll talk about that. The Mavs is not one of mine, so spoiler alert on that one. And then, of course, we'll play Count It Up, where we count out the most interesting, fun things in the NBA, including Jason Tatum just doing everything. And Bronny James, rumors about Bronny James. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's start here, Rylan. The most interesting team to me going into the offseason is the Phoenix Suns, because the Phoenix Suns compiled Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal. This incredible threesome. A lot of people thought they were going to be really good, at least the top 4, top 5 in the West. And they ended up not being that. They ended up getting ousted in the first round. And they're a second apron team. They've got a bunch of restrictions. They can only trade one player at a time. They can't aggregate players in a trade. They can't acquire a player in a sign and trade. They can't send cash out in a trade. They have the first round. They have a 2024 pick and a 2031 pick that they can technically trade, but it's the 22nd pick in the draft this year. Can't trade it until draft night. They've got some interesting things going there. My question is, and then they could have a Kevin Durant extension coming. They've already extended Grayson Allen. They only on their roster have Booker, Beal, Grayson Allen as guards, Durant, Nas Little, and big body David Roddy as like wings, and then Nurkic at center. That's all they've got. They've got to fill out the rest of this roster. My biggest question about the Suns is, what can they do?
Yeah, not much. I don't know what they can do other than run it back, and that's what's so interesting is that it feels like they're not in control, not only of their own destiny, but like literally how this summer goes. But especially if like Kevin Durant requested a trade, what would they do at that point? Like, because even that's like the tricky part of it is that like even trading one of those guys still does not set you up the way it would in a different scenario because of how hard capped they are and because of just where they're at as a franchise. I think that their only course of action is to run it back with as cost control as you can get, filling out the roster, and then you're banking on that new ownership group still having the fresh car smell of just wanting to run it back. There's some stats that they're going to throw out there about like, well, when this team was healthy, they were on a 50, win pace, and they were on a 50 whatever win pace, and every team can really do that. Like you have to be really bad, like the Pistons, to not have a stretch where you played really good basketball for the most part. So I just think that all they can do is run it back.
They're going to do something though. That's why they're interesting to me, is because as constricted as they seem to be, they do have that new car smell still. They're like, all right, new owner syndrome. We've got to make a splash. Last year was not good for them. Like that was as bad as you could have maybe expected it to get to that point, to lose in the first round, to not move on. A lot of people picked them. They didn't win. First round exit is not what you expected from this group. And so there's going to be something. Like there's going to be some kind of move made. And I wonder, they can't trade Grayson Allen until the start of the season. He'll most likely be on the team to start the year. Nurkic is like the one guy, $18 million, that it makes enough that they could actually trade him out. Nas Little's making 6.5. I don't know if that's enough to like add with the draft pick to do something, but the Nurkic piece is there. But the problem is, if you trade Nurkic, then where do you go with center? Like you've almost got to just replace it. And I guess it is just a run it back thing. But to me, there's something there. Like they're going to do something to me. I don't know what it is. And that's why they're interesting to me.
I think that what's crazy is that you might, the way that they might improve their roster the most, hypothetically, could be trading Kevin Durant. Like,
Oof.
in keeping Booker and Beal, which would then just be a sloppy mess. Like, I don't think that they're going to do that, just for clarity's sake. But what other guy could you trade to fill out your roster and still get talent back? Like, hypothetically speaking, if it's trading KD to OKC and you get Cason Wallace, you get Josh Giddey, you get Ousmane Dieng, you get 4 first-round picks. Like, what other avenue do you have to fill out a roster and kind of restock your assets a little bit than moving Kevin Durant? They're not going to do that. I think that they're going to keep their core intact. And so from there, you have a middling pick and a bad draft and Nurkic to work with. And I think that you desperately need to go get a point guard somewhere.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is that they have needs. They have needs on the roster, and they need defense a lot too. Like, they've got to find that somewhere. They've got to re-sign Royce O'Neal. Josh Okogie is going to be a free agent too, so they've got to figure out what they're going to do with him. There's not a lot of things to work with, but there's a lot to do for that team, and that's why they're one of my interesting ones. You just mentioned a potential trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's one of your teams that's the most interesting to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that even unbiasedly, this is the most interesting team of the offseason.
Okay.
Because, like, what makes them so interesting is the same reason why they're going to be attached in every single rumor. Like, whoever demands a trade this summer, whoever hits the free agency market after these opt-outs and everything, they will be attached to the Thunder for the simple fact of logistically and logically, it would make sense. Like logistically, the Thunder have top 5 in the league cap space. They have 4 open roster spots. They have a treasure chest of draft picks, and they have a 57-win team that's ready to contend. Like, that's what they have at their disposal. And then, logically, you can sell yourself on this Thunder team has ways to improve. And even for as good as they were last year, they can get even better. They should go be aggressive in these next 2 years before you have to have those extensions kick in for your young core. So that leads to them being in position to do almost anything, and it would make sense, and you could defend it. It's just a matter of what they actually want to do and what's actually available to them versus what we kind of dream up for them.
Man, that team has a lot going for them. They should have made the West Finals this year, right? They
PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr., the series of their lives.
The Thunder fans still can't get over that. They still can't. They left them open. They left them open for 6 games, and then they're like, how dare they?
I think that's that series from them highlights an underrated need for the Thunder. Of people are going to look at their front court lack of front court depth, but in reality. The way that they got beat by the Mavs was because the Mavs had Derrick Jones Jr. and PJ Washington, who were willing to take open shots and were willing to have the ball in their hands and did not shy away from the moment. Whereas the players who got the Thunder to that point of a 1 seed and a sweep and their first playoff series wins since 2016, they were deathly afraid of that moment for the majority of that series and didn't want to take the shot. So if you don't take the shot, you have no chance of having an outlier series. That's how you get the shot variances, by actually taking the opportunities. And the Thunder didn't have enough guys who are actual dogs that were willing to be in that moment. So that is an underrated need. So this team, for as good as they were, and you can say many great things about the Thunder, that they do have, they need another playmaker. They need front court depth. They need some dogs. They need some more athletes. They still have ways to really improve. And the tools, unlike the Suns, to actually go do almost anything.
These are the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. As the Thunder can do anything, the Suns can almost do nothing, with their stuff that they have going on there. If you're gonna make a prediction, what's one thing that the Thunder do? What's one player they try to bring in, one type of player, or even if you have a specific player that you want them to bring in?
Yeah, I would be pretty shocked if the Thunder didn't go get someone who has a big contract for the next 2 years, and then it either fades off or becomes really tradable to kind of maximize the cap situation right now. Because even if you, for example, go sign Isaiah Hartenstein, right, who is not the perfect fit for the Thunder, but a guy who's been linked to them and a guy that people really like for them. Even if you do just sign him, if it works out, great. If not, look at how valuable it was just to have someone like a Bruce Brown, just like to have a Bruce Brown to match in trade talks. Having that ability to match in trades was pivotal for the Pacers to go get their Siakam. So initially last summer, it looked like the Pacers just signed Bruce Brown and overpaid for him a little bit. It leads to them getting a huge piece of their future. that's what you buy yourself. You buy yourself that additional time whenever you have a guy like Hartenstein come into the fold. It's hard to really nail down like a certain player that the Thunder should target because we don't know enough information of like who's available. Like right now, Hartenstein and Patrick Williams are like the big names. But what if Kevin Durant demands a trade? Then all of a sudden that changes everything of what you're looking at. Like, what if Paul George is all of a sudden like, hey, I've been in Oklahoma before. This would be a complete 180 from historical precedent of like a superstar signing in a small market. But
let me go
I've
back.
been in Oklahoma. I know what this is about. Like, I'll come back to get a 2-year max with OKC. Like, who knows? So it's tough to nail down. But I think that Patrick Williams would be a guy that the Thunder would absolutely look at for the future.
Paul George on his podcast, though, just said he wants to just chill and play basketball and make max money. So he could do that in OKC. He can just chill and make max money.
Chill. You can fish like Hefner. Shout out. I mean, he can bowl. He had a really good bowling streak his first stint in OKC. So.
Streak as in he scored well, or he just played a bunch of days in a row?
Oh, I'm sure both. I'm sure that he was really knocking the pins down, and I'm sure there's nothing else to do.
There was a Reddit thread recently that was, what's the city in the NBA that players want to live in the least? And OKC came up a million times.
Yeah, and I know as an Oklahoman, you're supposed to like fight back on that. There's no real response of like, yeah, if I had $1 billion in my bank account, what would be the least entertainment option? It'd be Oklahoma City, even though it's a fantastic city to actually live in for most people. But for millionaires, like you can go anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'm also not defending Dallas against like the New Yorks and the LAs and the Chicagos, even though like the Dallas-Fort Worth area population-wise is getting close there, but we're not doing that.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
Boston hopped on a bird and went to Miami after winning a championship, so.
That's right. Yeah, they didn't even stay in Boston. It was nice there. I enjoyed the food there. Coming up, let's talk about the other teams that are most interesting. The Atlanta Hawks have the number 1 pick and have kind of been a disappointment the last couple of years. What do they do? We'll talk about all that and more coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, and you can go get tickets to concerts, theater, shows, sporting events, all kinds of stuff. WNBA games. I went to a Dallas Wings game against the Seattle Storm recently, and I used Game Time. I didn't buy my tickets until I was on my drive on the way from Dallas to Arlington where the Wings played. Took about a 30-minute drive, and I bought them on the way there because you can save up to 60% buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater with the priority last-minute deals that you can get on Game Time. They also have flash deals. They have zone deals, all-in pricing, so you can toggle it and see all the fees up front. They don't surprise you at the end. They have your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry with the Game Time ticket coverage, all that kind of stuff. To take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, concerts, movies, all that kind of stuff with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On NBA, being part of the show, being an everydayer, listening every day. We have a daily Locked On show that covers your team. Check the link in the description to find a show that covers your team every day. We also have the 24/7 stream, Locked On Sports Today, where you can listen to people that actually know what they're talking about their team. So go listen to Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 stream on YouTube or Amazon Fire. Check that out and listen. Find a show that you like. Maybe you like Locked On Thunder. Maybe you like Locked On Suns. We talked about those teams already. Some great stuff there. Now let's talk about my next team is the Atlanta Hawks. Our good friend Brad Rowland over there covering the Atlanta Hawks. They've got the number 1 pick in maybe the least anticipated draft in recorded history. I mean, I don't know that there's a single like casual basketball fan that even is like anywhere interested in this draft at all. And they got the number 1 pick. No. And so you'd think that it would be this great, huge thing. Remember when the ticket office screamed when the Pelicans got the number 1 pick for Zion? Remember when, the San Antonio Spurs, they got Wemby and everybody freaked out about it? This is not even close to that. But
the ticket office is weeped.
They're like, no.
This was our luck year of getting the 1 pick with Zachary Richardson.
I had to say his name out loud like 3 times before he did this because I was like, I'm going to mention him, and I don't want to mess up his name again on here. The Hawks, though, are interesting to me because they've been a disappointment the last couple of years. They made the Eastern Conference Finals in 2022, then 2 first-round exits in a row. Then they lost in the play-in this past year. They've got their first apron team. They're like $9 million away from the second apron. They've got a bunch of contracts, actually, if you start looking up and down their roster. And they've got the Trae Young, DeJounte Murray backcourt, which I don't know that anybody thinks that they're going to stay together or just run it back with those guys. Like, I think they'll make some kind of move. Plus, they've got Jalen Johnson, who's kind of an interesting player. And then they've got the number one pick, like the number one pick in our mock draft. We're literally doing our mock draft right now. Brad Rowland ended up picking Sarr. He picked Alex Sarr. And to me, like, Alex Sarr is just a little bit bigger Jalen Johnson, the way that I've been, like what I've read and seen about him. And so that's kind of an interesting fit to me. They also have Clint Capella still and Onyeka Okongwu. This team is very interesting to me. My first question is, do they just run it back?
Yeah, at this point, it feels like we've been getting teased about this whole Murray possible trade and Trae Young possible trade for too long for you to put the toothpaste back in the tube. It'd be a little shocking. I think that at a bare minimum, you might run back that backcourt, but at a bare minimum, you have to make some moves. Like Clint Capella, I don't know if he's still hanging around Atlanta at the start of next year. Either him or Onyeka Okongwu, you can get some value, I think, for either one of those guys. Just depending on whoever they prefer to keep, especially if you do add Sarr, which I do think is the right pick, into the fold.
To run it back with Trae Young again, I don't know. Like, is this the time? Is this the time? But I don't know if there's somebody interested in him right now, because there was a lot of talk about the Spurs. If they want to do that deal, it didn't seem like they were super interested in that. Who makes that move for Trae Young? Like, who is the team that is interested in him? And then what are you doing? You're starting over DeJounte Murray and Alex Sarr. Like that's kind of what you're doing. Murray's a couple years older than Trae Young too, so feels like this is a DeJounte Murray trade, and maybe a Clint Capella trade him off before people realize that he's about to fall off in a year or two. Maybe they try that, but at least they have Jalen Johnson. They have some interesting stuff. They have this number one pick that they'll get somebody interesting with. And but man, they're just such an interesting team. Like what direction they decide to go in. They could trade both of them. Honestly, what if they just trade both the guards? Just start over.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that option to just hit the reset button completely. I'd be curious to see what you could get of a Trae Young trade. And this oftentimes comes off as like bashing Trae Young, the individual player, but more so like you think of the teams that have the assets to pull off a star trade, like the Thunder. Trae Young would not at all fit with what the Thunder are building and their team identity and what they are. So like one of the premier teams for setting you up for the future in a trade would not be an option for a Trae Young trade. So like at that point, do you just hold on and keep holding out hope for Trae Young and then move on from DeJounte Murray and move on from some of these guys? I think at a bare minimum, they have to make a front court trade. I don't think that you can keep Sarr, Okongwu, and Clint Capella, but full blast, I would trade everyone and just restart completely.
The trade for Trae Young, I think, is the Washington Wizards.
Ooh, Will Dawkins getting spicy here.
I think that's the trade, because they've got the number 2 pick, so you trade that, maybe a future first or two. You don't have to send anything else. You can keep Kuzma. Kuzma's hanging out there. To me, that's an interesting one. I don't know what you do with Jordan Poole after that. Maybe you just bring him off the bench, but that's the team that's the team I'm interested in with a potential Trae Young trade, because they need to move the needle somehow. They need to move it in some way.
Yeah, I would be shocked if they just completely ran it back.
Yeah. What's your other interesting team?
My other interesting team, I debated between a couple options, but I settled on the Cleveland Cavaliers because they just I could make the argument in a very passionate way that they should understand they're just at best a 4 seed. They might have a sneaky good regular season if they actually try, because oftentimes that's all it comes down to in the modern NBA is if you're healthy and you try. But
in the East,
especially in the East. But when push comes to shove, like they're not going to beat any of the big powers and out East, how little of that there are. They're not going to be a legitimate contender out East even. So you might as well just reset everything. But on the other hand, there are not very many powers out East.
Reset everything? Like the big talk. So Danny Cunningham on Locked On Cavs has been talking about the core 4. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. You just reset all 4 of them. You just trade them all off.
I would be interested in what that looks like. Do you then top what like Oklahoma City got whenever they reset everything? And now you give yourself the stability of, we have this massive runway of like, if one guy hits, plus we have all this draft capital, and we assuredly then at that point have a lot of cap space as well. Like, we are just the most flexible franchise for the future, and all it cost us was some guys that aren't good enough anyway. And I don't really know if that's a bad option or not. I would really argue against running it back, though, because I just don't see the value in running it back if you're Cleveland, besides to give your fan base a fun regular season, which, if you want to make that argument, I guess that's fine. But like, they're not at all true contenders. And I'd rather just trade like Mitchell or trade Garland, one of the two, especially now, because you're never going to get more value than this, because the least, the less club control that you have of the player whenever you deal them, the less you're going to get back for them. And so it's a tough decision to make. Like the Thunder, who got set up in that position, they could have ran it back with Paul George and Russ, and
yeah, they could
exit, and they would have had a fun regular season, would have been on paper contenders.
They weren't 23-24 though. That's the thing about Garland and Mobley, is like, if they're gonna
and Mobley aren't MVP caliber guys though.
No, they're not. They're not, and I don't know that they're on their way to being that either. Even Mobley, like we hoped that he would be on that path, but it doesn't look like he's getting there anytime soon. If he is, it would take some kind of leap a little later in his career to do that. But yeah, that was an interesting one. Yeah, I've been listening to Danny Cunningham on Locked On Cavs, and he doesn't think that they're going to trade any of the four. Like, he kind of wanted them to. There's been a Darius Garland like rumored trade request. Donovan Mitchell is, always wanted to go to New York. It seems like maybe that'll happen. Maybe it won't happen. Seems like Jared Allen is the only one that's like cool hanging out there.
And he got thrown under the bus by JB Bickerstaff. But the only way I'd run it back is if you were 100% certain that Mitchell wants to be a Cleveland Cavalier and wants to be like there for a significant portion of time. The only real selling point for that would be, there's only 30 gigs. Like, you can only be the face of 30 franchises.
Yeah.
So to be the face of a franchise is really, really, really cool. And in a franchise that could see everything break their way. Like, we just saw how the East got decimated by injuries. They only needed a couple more to like be the last team standing. Not that you wish injury at all on anyone, but it just shows like the war of attrition that you have to go through, that you can see things break your way, but to see it break your way, you have to be in that position to be in the playoffs and to be a top team in the East, which you can only do if you run it back. So it's very interesting, because I don't think that there's necessarily a wrong answer. And so you just kind of pick whatever it's a pick your own adventure type of storyline.
The wrong one is like a year from now when we know what actually happened in the season. But they were only one win away from avoiding the Celtics in that bracket, and then they're probably in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then we're like talking about them like the Hawks a couple years ago, right? I mean, I say you just run it back and try it again. I say you keep trying it, see what happens. Maybe you get some kind of if you get a crazy offer for a Garland or a Mitchell or something like that, then maybe you retool on the fly and try that. But yeah, you're not really going anywhere. But I mean, you don't have the one piece that you're not sitting like the Dallas Mavericks last year. You have a top 5 player, and you've got to make a move, because you are one move away from going to the finals, I guess, which apparently they just did. So those are the teams that are interesting to us. Coming up, let's play Count It Up, where we count out the most interesting, fun things in the NBA, including Jason Tatum just trying to have it all. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com or download the app, and you can pick more or less than 2 to 6 players' stat projections. So you just pick 2 to 6 players. They got their stat projections already. You don't have to make them up. You just have to pick more or less. It's literally your only option. So they've got the WNBA. Right now, there's a couple options in front of me. I'm going to go Sabrina Ionescu of the Liberty playing against the Sparks, 17.5 points. I'm going to go, you know what? Give me less on that, but give me Breanna Stewart more on 19.5. So I'm going to do that one. Breanna Stewart, 9.5 rebounds. Give me less on that one. Jonquel Jones, 8 rebounds. I'm going to go more on Jonquel. Sabrina Ionescu, assist, 6.5. Give me more. I took less on the points, so give me more on the assist. Let me do one more of these. Jonquel Jones, 16.5 points. Give me less on that one too. If I put down $20 on those plays that I just made, I can win $500. Super fun. If you put down $5, I can win $125 on that. That's super fun. Go check it out at PrizePicks. And when you download the PrizePicks app, you can use that code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Put $100 in your account. They'll match it and give you $100. You'll have $200 then to play with, to have some fun with. You can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. And there's more with WNBA and all kinds of MLB games this summer, stuff like that. Go check it out. PrizePicks.com. Use that promo code LOCKEDONNBA. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us on Locked On NBA. This is the time of the week where we talk about those interesting, fun things in the NBA. It's our segment.
Big chicken, baby.
Zion Williams and porn star.
Take that for that.
Count it up, count it up, count it up, count it up, count it up.
Jason Tatum is an NBA champion. Congrats to him and the Boston Celtics. He's now has won an NBA championship. He did not win the Finals MVP, but he won the MVP of the guy that tried the most like winning lines after the series. He tried to end it with the final line. He tried every single line he'd heard someone else say after winning a title. And here's a couple of them with who he was quoting basically afterwards, which is kind of funny.
Count it up.
We did it. We did it! Anything's possible. Anything's possible!
Garnett.
What they gonna say now? What they gonna say now? What are they gonna say now?
Curry.
I know everybody was wondering what would happen if he didn't win.
I guess we'll never know.
Everybody wants to know.
This one's
what I would
Kanye.
do
It's tough.
I didn't know you could still do this in the year of our Lord 2024.
I guess we'll never know.
So he quotes Kevin Garnett. He like emulates Kevin Garnett, Steph Curry, the Kanye quote. He's doing it all. Yeah, he did the Kobe picture too afterwards. My question is,
Count it up.
which Tatum line worked the best? Which one did you actually feel was him?
Yeah, it's tough because none of them feel like a Jason Tatum original. These are all kind of clear carbon copies.
At least he didn't say the same words as Kevin Garnett. At least he didn't go, anything is possible. Like, at least he didn't do that.
Yeah, I will say he deserves an Oscar for the we did it, because it's you have to watch him. If you watch the way his face lights up after the first we did it, it sells you on the whole, like, that was just pure emotion and elation and jubilation and the biggest moment of his life. And like, that's what came out of his mouth. But looking at it side by side with Kevin Garnett on audio only, it's like, well, this was clearly staged. His face, you got to see the face though. So I'll go with the KG. Although I will say, very tough also that KG Celtics title, Tatum Celtics title. It adds fuel to the fire. I was shocked that they did not pour Gatorade on Joe Mazzulla.
I think I guess we'll never know worked the best because he was sloshed. He was trashed by the time he did that, and he actually did pull off that line very well at that point in there. The thing that he actually did the best was the lifting up of Deuce with that photo of all the confetti. I mean, that was the best thing. Like, that's the iconic thing that will come back. It won't be any of these like lines that he rehearsed or anything like that. But yeah, he pulled off that one. Rich Paul. Recently, there was a story from Draft Express, Jonathan Gavoni of ESPN. Rich Paul confirmed that Bronny James had worked out for just two NBA teams, the Suns we already talked about, and the LA Lakers. He said that's by design, but there are also three teams interested in Bronny James. The Timberwolves, he said, I don't know who their owner will be. The Mavericks, Nico Harrison is like an uncle to Bronny James, and then Toronto at 31. He said Masai loves Bronny. My question is,
Count it up.
where do you want Bronny to end up?
Yeah, I would want Bronny to end up either in Phoenix or in Dallas, because those are two teams that, like, it would be pandemonium if he went to one of those two, because there's already been the little whispers of like the Suns are going to the Suns are going to somehow get Kevin Durant paired up with LeBron and Bronny and Beal and Booker, and then you have the Kyrie Dallas connection of like, well, they got Bronny, they got Kyrie. LeBron wants to be back with Kyrie, and it's just going to be a fun content cycle for those two teams. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And for Dallas, I mean, the Texas Legends aren't far away, and you can go,
watch them. Frisco,
and they'll come to Oklahoma City quite a bit, so that'll be a lot of fun as well.
You've already got the connection with Kyrie. Remember last year when Kyrie was about to be re-signed, there was the talks with the Suns for Kyrie, but then there's also talks with the Lakers. And then there was that story that came out of nowhere. It was like, actually, Kyrie is recruiting LeBron to Dallas. And you're like, wait, what? How is that supposed to happen? Well, hey, this is the way that it could happen. I want to. I don't know where I want to. I want to see him go somewhere that is nowhere near any of these places. Toronto. I guess let's go Toronto at 31.
That I think is another good option because like imagine the storyline of like LeBronto into now he's a Raptor. Like now he's a Raptor.
LeBronto Jr.
Yeah, LeBronto Jr. Only this time it's the positive edition.
Yeah, you can get the actual. So wherever Bronny ends up, he's probably the most recognizable player in this draft, which is wild to me. It's him, Zach Edey, and probably that's it.
Yeah, that's all of the notoriety from a casual fan standpoint of like Zach Edey. And what's crazy is there's also a 2-time NCAA champion in this draft that's going to be a top 10 pick and Donovan Clingan. Just think of like the Florida Gators that went back to back with Billy Donovan. The two schools that went back to back, the notoriety is completely different. The landscape is completely different of how popular their runs were.
Well, I think people knew Jalen Brunson when he was 2-time and he went like beginning of the second round. My last one real quick. Charles Barkley announced that he's retiring from TV at the conclusion of the 2024-25 season, so this upcoming NBA season. My question is,
Count it up.
do you buy his bluff? Will Chuck actually not be on TV after next NBA season?
I don't believe it. I think that like there's going to be some iteration of a Charles Barkley television appearance because, frankly, there's just no reason for there not to be. It's great leverage right now to talk about retiring and everything, but at the end of the day, no matter if it's for Turner or if it's for a different network, you can't beat getting paid to just talk sports with the fellas. And I think that like it's really tough to give that up in actuality, especially if you're such a outgoing person and a charismatic person by all accounts. Like it's going to be a part of his life that I think seems easy to give up on right now. But once you're just twiddling your thumbs a little bit, it's less and less and less fun as the weeks go by, and you just want to hop in and create some form of content again. And I think that'll be on a television space where he's like more comfortable.
It's a bluff to me. It's a bluff. Not buying it. I think he'll be back after that. I think that he's saying, hey, I'm going to retire from TV unless you guys put something together. But he's not going to announce the unless you guys put something together thing out loud, right? This is exactly like the whole. It's a holdout. It's almost like a holdout or a threat from retirement from a player. I mean, we've seen it over and over again, and he's just a player doing it on the opposite side of his career. So no, it's a bluff to me. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Guys, let me know what you think is the most interesting team going into the offseason. Go check out Rylan Stiles at Locked On Thunder. I'm doing Locked On Mavs still. Post-finals, talking about all kinds of offseason stuff. Your show's probably more interesting than mine at this point with all the options you have over at the Thunder. But we have all that. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked On NBA. Hanging out with us this week. We'll be back tomorrow. Adam Mares and Wes Goldberg. We'll have the draft this week. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA.